First of all, I would like to extend my thank yous to the organizers of this learning conference, and also, I'm very happy because the title alone, Climate Justice for Vulnerable Populations, already sets the tone for this learning conference. So at least, it makes my job easier putting my activist hat on and my CSO hat on. And at least, we're talking about climate issues from a justice perspective. So the slide now shows you that certain funding mechanisms have been set up for REDD Plus, and Jessica already mentioned about it through the UNDP, the UNEP, and the World Bank's Forest Carbon Partnership Facility. The climate funds make more funding available for mitigation than adaptation. I should warn you about that. And I think, at this point, for us from the South, mitigation is sexy, yeah, but we have actual adaptation needs because climate change is already impacting on our populations, and unfortunately climate funds are not going the way of adaptation as much as we want them to go. Mitigation, there's a lot of business opportunities towards mitigation, but again, I would like to stress that adaptation is where the actual need is at the moment. There are a number of challenges for REDD Plus. From Asia, we have the most number of indigenous peoples in the world, comprising 2/3 of the world's population, and there are around 88 to 100 million indigenous peoples and other forest dwellers in 10 REDD Plus countries in Asia. Some of the challenges for REDD. The first one is, how do you measure carbon plus? Now, it's not just about carbon, but more than just carbon. I think one fundamental flaw of REDD is just it looks at forests as carbon sinks. But of course, we know better than that. Forests are more than just carbon sinks. So how do you now come up with an accurate estimate of how much carbon is being stored in order to place value on carbon-bearing potential of any forested area? So we cannot quantify lives, we cannot quantify biodiversity. The second issue is making payments. How will countries be rewarded, and what form will this reward take? More importantly, who should be paid for a specific forested area? Will it be governments? Will it be the indigenous groups who are, taking care of the forest throughout the decades? The third critical question around REDD would be on accountability. Supposing all the REDD payments have been made, but the forest still gets depleted, what then? What can be done to ensure that carbon payments lead to actual and sustained forest protection? And of course, there's another issue around financing. Should emissions reductions be linked to market-based carbon trading system? I think that is a very critical question that we need to reflect on. Some key issues around REDD Plus. The first would be the non-recognition of the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. For many countries around the world, not just from Asia, indigenous peoples are hardly acknowledged. So they're only referred to as ethnic groups. So there's a whole plethora of difference when you recognize that they are indigenous peoples with their own set of values, blah, 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 than to just refer to them as ethnic groups. So definitely the whole range of political questions such as violations of their right to free, prior, and informed consent comes in. But more importantly, it's a violation of indigenous people's rights to self-determination, land tenure, and customary laws. The second contentious issue is that, ironically, it unjustly targets indigenous peoples and other forest dwellers as the drivers of deforestation. IPs and other forest dwellers who have called the forest their homes for decades, for generations, are now being looked upon as the drivers of deforestation. How ironic can that get? Traditional forest management practices have led to the conservation of forests and biological diversity throughout the decades, but now they're the drivers of deforestation. And the last thing here is markets and offsets are incompatible with indigenous knowledge and value systems. Some other key issues against Red Plus, it rewards the traditional players in deforestation. As I mentioned earlier, it is actually more business than usual for them. It takes away the responsibility for mitigation from the north to the south. And we fear, and it is actually happening right now, that Red Plus projects will contribute to global land grabs and land use conversion. Some people will call it foreign land acquisition. Some would call it, I don't know, but let's call a rose a rose. It's going to contribute to land grabs. Of course, no, we've already raised our concern that these conversions will lead to more violent evictions, human rights violations, increasing militarization. And if you're engaged in the financial markets, it will lead to more speculation. No? And who knows what markets will bring. But unfortunately, Red Plus still provides for market solutions when in fact it is the market failures that have brought us to these problems.